that child has seen their pediatrician multiple times during that time. Maybe park district play groups, where have they been? Communities, churches, programs, that really could be. And the federal law does state that the before 3, an early intervention through the Department of Health, Human Health Services, and then after 3, the Department of Education, they have an obligation to seek out these children for services. It's not enough to just say, we're here, come to us if you need us. They have to actually actively seek out the children in the communities. So the advertisement programs, outreach, all of these efforts are federally mandated. So good to know. Yes.
Is the phrase diagnostic impression the same thing as a concrete diagnosis?
That is a good question. It might be a little bit of semantics, but I would say yes, a diagnostic impression is a nice way to say a diagnosis.
Okay. The second question, you kind of already answered this, but I'm not totally clear. So a kiddo comes through an EI and it's paid for through early intervention.
Yeah.
A follow-up is always recommended on every summary and report that I've seen.
Pretty much.
At that point, for a family who doesn't have private insurance or any means to pay, how do they access those services?
Yes,
With a medical
so
card?
that is right, medical card. So it depends, and now in the day and age of our managed care public aid services, everyone's in a different network. And so they do have to contact their insurance plan to see who's the developmental pediatrician in our system I can see. If they do not have a developmental pediatrician in their system, they can get approval to see someone out of network because it's a service that their medical network does not provide. So they can do that. Yeah.
So the approval will be done by the insurance or by the main pediatrician?
It's the insurance. You have to go through a little bit of an appeal to get that done. I don't know if anyone has an experience with that, but if it's a provider of a service that is not offered in the medical network, they have to, you can apply for an appeal for an out-of-network provider.
Is that also true for services like OT, PT, speech, whatever, after 3? It's the same process? I'm just having a lot of trouble finding resources for families with medical cards.
With medical card, I tell families your best bet is to find a hospital-based practice.
Okay.
And a hospital within your health care network. And so that's why we have such a long wait list.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
they have to be open to taking some less appealing times, as well.
Yeah.
Because if they have an opening, like, take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we would have very long wait list. So.
For services after 3.
This is
I know.
the problem in the state of Illinois. I think the insurance companies are becoming more and more exclusive, and less people are able, and private clinics are able to take a lot of these different plans. So they're very narrow in what plans they can take. And so
hopefully they will qualify for some school support.
Absolutely.
But the school also has its limitations, right? They can only
Yep.
work on things that are related
Educational.
to the curriculum.
Right.
So, but hopefully there's somebody watching their child.
Yes.
So I had a question. How did the results change your therapy sessions for the 2 of you who have gotten diagnoses? Did they change your therapy? Did it change your IMSP at all?
No.
No?
No, and same thing for my son. He came back that they did not diagnose him with autism. It was global developmental delay, hyperactivity, and speech sound disorder to monitor for apraxia. And his therapist from EI didn't feel like, so like if they did think that he had apraxia, I guess the way that speech therapy would be done would be changed, if I'm not mistaken. But
Gotcha.
his therapist that he works with didn't feel like it was apraxia, so nothing really changed.
Did you agree with that, or was there anything that you would have wanted to get changed based off of?
No, I was, no, I felt like the goals that they had set, before were still appropriate for, how he was functioning and things, so I didn't feel like, anything.
And apraxia is a really, if I can just, it's a very tricky diagnosis. It's not usually made within a short amount of time.
Right.
So maybe they wrote that in the report just to put a bug in that therapist's
Yes,
ear,
that's
like,
exactly.
keep your eyes out for that.
Yeah, that's exactly, it was just monitor for it.
Right.
And they even said, he doesn't have enough speech to even, make that,
Right,
to
right.
make that. But that would be the only, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the approach to apraxia is like a little different than how he was receiving speech.
Yeah.
But if he's not making that many sounds, it doesn't change it.
Right, exactly.
So,
Yes.
Or just getting more
don't feel
sound.
like, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
They may have used a lot of the same
Right.
strategies, and you may not even know that, there were kind of some strategies for apraxia too.
Right.
Like the note brushes and the
Oh,
oral
yeah.
exercises and all sorts of things like that.
I have a question for the parents as well. And Beth, you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but, so I'm a speech therapist again, and I do a lot of initial evaluations. And sometimes, so I'm like the first speech therapist who families have contact with ever in their child's life. And oftentimes, I'm evaluating a kiddo who's maybe 24, 25, 26, 27 months. And that means they're starting to age, and from my mind, though you're 2, in my mind, I think, oh my goodness, this kid, who I'm noticing some red flags immediately, this kid is going to be aging out of the early intervention soon. And I'm, again, as an initial evaluator, first pair of eyes on this kiddo, I'm thinking initially, I want to get this kiddo scheduled for a medical diagnostic. So my question to you guys is, how did your therapists broach the medical diagnostic question with you guys? What are some things you found helpful? And what are some things you were like, I wish my therapist didn't say that to me? Because I'm wanting to make that referral process as smooth and as, I don't know, welcoming.
Non-confrontational.
Yeah, non-confrontational. But I really want the therapist to trust me as a provider. And, so what are some things that you found helpful? And what are some things that you didn't find helpful?
I'm ready for you,
Okay.
because Parker had his whole diagnosis, so
Mhm.
this has been a journey since he was 5 months old,
Okay.
so
Mhm.
it was
Okay.
an early thing, so.
So you
yeah.
kind of, it was like.
Yeah, it was
No.
never a question, yeah.
So, for me, the one therapist talked to another therapist,
Mhm.
and then that therapist might have thought that I had heard about them wanting to do this before, but it was really my first time hearing it, but I was on board with it.
Okay.
So I was okay with it. However, I can say something that might be helpful for some people. My husband was like medical, and his mind said they're gonna medicate him, like he's 2 years old. So I was like, no,
Because there's a
no.
medical, it says
Right.
medical
Yes.
diagnostic.
So he's thinking, he's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't, he didn't want it, he's like, was super against it. So I'm like, well, why are you against it? And he said, because I don't wanna medicate him. And I said, okay. And I said, it's highly unlikely that he will be medicated. I said, especially at 2, and it's not like, not gonna happen. And, also, I think he thought it'd be like a little more invasive, and it's not. So I explained that it's more play-based, just like therapy is, and, I would never wanna do anything, I kinda had to remind him, I wouldn't ever do anything to put my kid in danger. This can only be for his benefit, he can't tell us, we have to be his voice, kind of. And then, again, just to know, your kid's the same kid you brought home from the hospital, not a whole lot's gonna change about, how you love your child, you're always going to. So, I think just explaining it maybe, and just
Okay.
taking away the idea.
Medically.
Yes,
part.
yes, because it does
Sorry.
sound so
Yeah.
medical
It does.
diagnostic. So like
Yeah.
you said, there's a clinic, or another set of eyes and a.
Yeah.
And did you say
Yeah.
clinic? I don't know, you said some kind of good word.
There's
Consultant.
another, yeah, maybe that's not the right word to use, but there's another group of, another team or
Yes,
another,
a team,
whatever.
team, I like
And
that.
if it's on an initial evaluation, that is so tricky.
It
I
is,
mean,
it's so, but sometimes we've all had those kiddos who I'm noticing red flags immediately.
Right, of
And I'm
course.
thinking, you need speech 2 times a week, and
Yeah.
you need a medical diagnostic, because
Right.
that's what you need at this point in development.
And the other tricky part with EI is you can't necessarily make recommendations on your own.
Right,
It has to
exactly.
come from the team,
And I-
which is hard in practice, right?
Exactly, and I've recently picked up a few kiddos, during their initial evaluation, that medical diagnostic was made. So it's already written into their IFSP, and I'm so thankful as that ongoing provider, because that's a long, when you're working up, I like to establish a little bit of a rapport with my families before I make that recommendation, just because it can be challenging for you guys, so, yeah. I
Maybe
was just-
talking about it in a more, matter-of-fact way,
Right,
and just
right.
saying, there's this other team, just so
Mhm.
you're aware of it. I want
Right.
you to know all of the resources that are available. We do have kind of the time of
Right,
turning 3.
sure.
And, maybe I'll just, what do you think, team, at the team meeting, at that initial evaluation?
Mhm.
Should we just write this on here? And, if we need to revisit it later, we can revisit it. And then when you
Yeah.
start with that kid and you see that it's written on there, you can say, oh, they mentioned it in this report at the very first day. Have anybody talked about it? Like, let's just start talking about it more. And then you don't have to, waste that time. I had a kid that I was building all this rapport with. And I'm talking with everybody on the team, but it wasn't a meeting. It was, we were getting to the point where we were really gonna talk about medical diagnostic, and there was a language barrier, there was a lot of stuff going on, and then the family moved.
Oh.
And so I had to write a discharge report, and I couldn't really write a recommendation for that, and so I was hinting like crazy
Yeah.
that perhaps another, but it's tricky, and then I feel like, oh my gosh. So I contacted the service coordinator to say, get me in touch with that next therapist so that they know the groundwork.
Right.
Because and then, he was 2.5.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not gonna be able to do this because I held my tongue or they moved. It was very sudden, I don't know what happened, but it's
So-
it's tricky.
And I've got a question for the providers too. Do you feel, because of this day and age and the wait list that we have, do you feel that you are over referring or over recommending medical diagnostic for kids? Or feel pressured to get a kid on a list if you think that maybe there may be an underlying developmental issue. And I'll say, I do see the other end when families come to the medical diagnostic clinic and say, yeah, we were worried about all of this before, but it's gotten so much better, but we had this appointment scheduled and we couldn't pass it up, and then, okay, this is part of the reason why we have longer wait lists too. So it's kind of somewhat of an issue that, we haven't done anything about it, where we're saying, no, you cannot come in. But I'm kind of wondering from the group, from both the provider and parent perspective, what you would do in that kind of
Yeah, so generally
Scenario.
speaking, just personally, I'm cautious as to, not cautious, I'm careful about recommending because I am aware of your wait list. I generally speaking, I like to see a kiddo for 3 to 6 months of consistent ongoing therapy, and that's I like it to be full team therapy for that amount of time because therapy can change so much, right? It can help dramatically. So I typically like to do that, but I will say that it's hard, Dr. Weeden, your point about, kiddos being scheduled, being put on a wait list, getting that slot, and then I don't think, and this is terrible now that I'm thinking about it, but I don't think that ever in my career has a family, once they've got into that medical diagnostic and they're the families that are, we were concerned, but things have gotten so much better.
Mhm.
I think they've all always still gone.
Right.
So that's a really
It's
good point.
validation.
Yeah, it's great. So
There's
it's a good
still
point.
things that get out of
Of
that
course,
clinic,
of
of
course.
course, but yeah.
Have you seen an increase in those cases?
I think as our waiting list goes up and up,
Mhm.
we do have, and it's not a lot, maybe one or two a month, but it does creep up. You know, we haven't decided to do anything, maybe I could ask for feedback, what you guys think would be the best way to approach those.
And I think that I should be the opposite. I think I potentially under-recommend a medical diagnostic, because it is such a long wait list. And because I know it's going to take so long to get in,
Mhm.
unless there is a very specific diagnosis that I think of and that I see red flags for, that I know can really only be diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician or by that team, I almost try to push for, I'm a little concerned about this, what about a neurology assessment? What about an orthopedic assessment? So like, if I see a kid who has a history of X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and I'm like, I'm a little concerned that it may be developing into something else, I may try to push more towards a very specific specialist,
That's fine.
rather than
Yeah.
trying to go to the whole team, only because sometimes, especially with private insurance, they can sometimes get into that specialist faster. And so we
Yeah.
might be able to, and then if that specialist still is like, I'm not sure, then, you know, like I almost try to exhaust other opportunities first,
Mhm.
than I do a team.
But referring to like a neurologist or someone like that, that's not paid for through EI, right? So
And it's
you,
predominantly, right, so
you're,
that's for like my
you're,
private insurance.
oh, okay, and you're depending on